Hello, I am speaking for winterinbaseball.com, my blog on baseball. I usually do this, and I've been doing a baseball biography thing, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame candidates, the Hall of Fame selections, I guess, that were recently done a couple days ago, and then some of the ones from the Veterans Committee, too. I'm not really going to debate the merit of them being in the Hall of Fame. I honestly believe in a pretty expanded Hall of Fame, so I'm not really pro. It's pretty rare that I'm pro keeping somebody out. I do have my opinions on certain things, like I am a little annoyed that David Ortiz got in while other guys who are accused of steroids will never get in, or at least it seems like they'll never get in. So stuff like that does kind of get on my nerves. And then there's also like some of the people who seem to be not so great from the past getting kind of glorified. Uh, Maybe not glorified is not the right word, but like I don't know, people like Cap Anson being in the Hall of Fame. Um, Not that I really think you should kick him out. Other players who had some kind of crappy beliefs, for lack of a better word, being in. Um, I don't know. Ultimately, that doesn't really bother me that much. It's just kind of seems like there's some double standards that are placed on modern players that really shouldn't be when you compare them to people who've been put in the past. So that stuff kind of gets on my nerves. It kind of bugs me too that especially like the weight that put against the steroid users. I get it, they were cheating and things like that. So I kind of see why they would be kept out of the Hall of Fame, but I just kind of believe in the Hall of Fame as a big expansive museum, and I think creating memorable baseball players ultimately and enshrining them in a museum so people remember them for a long time. And a sport that's been around for about 150 years at this point, I have no problem with at all. So I'm not really going to discuss the merits of these guys being in. I do know there could be a little bit level of controversy associated with Billy Wagner, him being a relief pitcher and a closer and all that. I don't have a problem with it, and to be honest, I'm repping this hat today. The Quad City River Bandits. This is their old logo. Minor league baseball team in the Quad Cities, the place that I grew up in. And Billy Wagner was actually a farmhand for this team. I actually have his baseball card right here. It's kind of hard to see because of the way the lighting is. Yeah, that's terrible. So sorry about that, but that's Billy Wagner as a Quad City River Bandit. And in the camera, it looks like he's right-handed, but he was left-handed. So that's kind of fun, I suppose. What I like most about Billy Wagner, besides the fact that he was a Quad City River Bandit, and I saw him play way back in the day, this card is probably from 1994, I would think, because on the back they have a stat from his time in Auburn, which I didn't even know had a team. But unless that's his college stats, I guess that's possible. I'm actually not sure if he played for Auburn. I should probably look into that. But regardless, he and it's funny because he's 1-3 with a 4.08 ERA for this team. So I don't think you're guessing that this guy would be a future Hall of Famer. But hey, here he is. He's in the Hall of Fame. But he's listed at 5'10", 180 pounds, so a pretty small person. And that was one of the things about Billy Wagner that I remember. He was very small, but he threw really, really hard. And when he played for the Houston Astros, my biggest memory with that is usually pain because I'm a Cubs fan, and I remember him very distinctly from the early 2000s teams and him coming out of the pen with Octavio Dotel, especially. And then they had other good relievers in the bullpen. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but in the ninth inning, Billy Wagner would always come in, and you're pretty much guaranteed that that game was going to end. In fact, I don't remember the Cubs ever coming back on Billy Wagner. It could have happened. I don't know. But based on my experience with him as a closer, I do think, hey, he's a Hall of Fame pitcher, and he's certainly memorable enough to me. I can kind of see why people don't like relievers in the Hall of Fame, especially if you believe in a more constricted Hall of Fame. There's probably a lot of guys you feel like deserve to be in over him. But as far as I'm concerned, I have no issue with Billy Wagner in the Hall of Fame. I am actually completely for it, and I think it's mostly because of the selfish reasons. Like I said, I have this baseball card from 1994. I'm sure it's worth nothing. Doesn't really matter. I don't plan on selling any of these cards, and it's got weird stains on the back too. And it was printed out of Bettendorf, Iowa. So unless that's just a sponsor. So yeah, I don't know. I can't be printed out of Bettendorf, Iowa. It's made by Fleer. I don't know. I don't really know where it's printed. It doesn't really matter. But I have a bunch of these. I used to get a bunch of these at River Bandits games when I was a kid. I was a member of their kids clubs, just like I was a member of the Rockies kids club. I was a member of the uh, Quad City River Bandits kids club. I believe is called the Posse kids club because their mascot was a raccoon. And I guess posse and raccoons go together. Maybe that's what a bunch of raccoons are called. I'm not really sure. That's just what I remember. So I would get a whole stack of these cards, a lot, and get free tickets. Got a T-shirt. I think free drinks and stuff. Sodas. I was 8, not alcohol. That would be illegal. Um, but maybe I would have been a lot happier as a kid. I don't know. Uh, but hey, maybe I was really happy. I got to go to free Quad City River Bandits games and get a Billy Wagner card. So Billy Wagner, I like him in the Hall of Fame. I like the idea of relievers in the Hall of Fame, anyways, especially closers, because I don't know. My thought process is as a player, and this is why when I'm doing like my World Series reviews or when I'm going through the World Series, I reward bench players if they perform well. If they go like 1 for 3 and that's the only at bats they get for the series, I say they had an impactful series. They went 1 for 3, they hit 333, they did every single thing they were asked to do. It's not their fault they didn't play more. That's the manager's decision, and not saying that decision was wrong, but that's the manager's decision. I'm just saying they did what they had to do with what they were provided with. That is, to a greater example, a closer's job. His job is to come into the ninth inning in the game. And if you can do that successfully, I think that does merit and you're doing your job and that's what you're supposed to do. I know like starting pitchers are asked to go deep into games, at least they used to be. Not as much as now anymore as they used to be, but that's kind of the role of the starting pitcher. And then the idea is that relief pitchers are not as good as starters, and that's usually true. Um, but that's more for like middle relievers. But then there's also relievers who have kind of their role. You have like middlemen, like middle relievers, setup men, lefty specialists, things like that. And their job is to come in and win the game and pitch well. And if they're doing their roles well, I think that should be recognized at the end of the day. I think that matters. And I don't think necessarily believe a closer, especially a closer, because a closer has like a very defined role, um, where they're kind of developed to be that. I know like most of the time you come up through the minors to be a starter, and ultimately it's like, well, this guy has a bunch of like really good stuff. He's really good breaking pitches. He is best suited to end the games. But I do think that that role specifically is designed for a very special type of pitcher. And that's why there are pitchers who get paid a lot of money to close games, and there are closers in the Hall of Fame, like your Mariano Rivera, Raleigh Fingers, other pitchers like that. Not a lot of them, but they are there for a specific reason. And I think we lost track of, in the area of statistics, in the era of statistics, very, very heavily controlling decision making in baseball. I think we have lost track a little bit of the mental side of things. The guy coming in to pitch the ninth inning in any of the game, there's like an intimidation factor a lot of times with these guys. They usually throw hard. A lot of them have like really weird facial hair or whatever. They have like cool entrances. You see guys with like cool sideburns or good goatee or a lot of tattoos or a crazy stare or whatever. There's just some sort of theatrics that comes with closing a game, or there's very much this mental side to it that I think we almost gets mocked a little bit in the area of statistics and things like that. But not just that. I think there is also this element of that's it. I mean, this is the ninth inning. You either get 3 outs when your team has the lead or you lose. And there's a lot of pressure with that situation. You come in and pitch, and if you fail, you're the guy in the newspaper. You're getting booed off the field. You're the one who gets recognized in the newspaper. I guess I keep saying newspaper like it's 1996. It's not, but you know what I mean. Like get criticized on social media and whatnot for being a terrible closer. Like a closer blows 3 saves in a row or something like that. He gets a lot of lot of flack. Like a starting pitcher who has 3 bad starts in a row, you definitely don't see that as much. But a closer who can't get the job done 3 times in a row, you already have people calling for their heads, calling for their position to be done, have somebody else close. there's all kinds of things that go with that. So to be a closer in Major League Baseball is very difficult, in my opinion, especially mentally. It's very much a challenge mentally. And I do think like that needs to be recognized more, especially in the era of modern analytics and statistics and that. And I'm not anti analytics or statistics or anything like that. I just think that element of being a closer matters. Plus, there's like I said, I enjoy the theatrics of it. Like I remember guys like Kerry Lightenberg had like huge sideburns. Eric Gagne with the big goggles, and then when he played for the Dodgers, they would say game over, and they would have that on the scoreboard, and his head would be bouncing around on the scoreboard, which is kind of weird, but also kind of awesome. They would play Welcome to the Jungle when he came out. It was a whole thing. It was almost like he was a rock star or like a pro wrestler or just something bigger than just a baseball player. And a lot of closers have these like crazy entrances and just all these like little quirks and unique things. You have like Craig Kimbrell with his stare, and he had like a beard for a little bit, but he had like his stare, his stance, his whole thing that he did. Rod Beck used to dangle his arm. He had a huge Fu Manchu mustache, a big mullet. You have even a guy like Aroldis Chapman, who's just huge. I mean, he's just a really, really huge person who threw really, really, really hard. Like I said, Eric Gagne had his goggles, just all kinds of different theatrics that go with being a closer. And just because of that, like, I don't know, it's a completely different position than every other position on the field. And there's a lot mentally going on with it. Like, pitching too is supposed to be the easiest part of baseball between hitting and pitching. So if you can't come in and get the job done, especially in that role, people view losing games on you. Like you are the goat. You are not in the greatest of all time version, but you're the one to blame. So that position just comes with so much pressure compared to any other position on the field. And while they don't pitch as many innings, obviously, and it's not seen as important because he's not a starter, that position still matters in a lot of ways. And yeah, again, no problem with Billy Wagner. If there's a person like a closer from that time period, aside from like a Mariano Rivera or Eric Gagne during his stretch, granted he had the PEDs, I would say Billy Wagner's up there with the closers from that era that I remember very, very distinctly, and I remember not wanting my team to face. Um, and that's him. But also, there's other guys. CC Sabathia, I have his card right here too. I have all their cards. I don't know. I just thought this would be fun to add those. There he is right there. He's a rather large fella, but he could pitch. With CC Sabathia, I'm not necessarily, it's really weird. It's hard for me to decide, like, to figure out what modern pitcher is going to go to the Hall of Fame, because for a long time, like, if they had like the big stats, like 300 wins or 3,000 strikeouts, or somebody like Pedro Martinez, who clearly was the most dominant pitcher you'd ever seen in that era, maybe of all time. People like that, you knew they were getting in, but we're not going to see 300 wins ever again, probably. Like 300 wins might be done, and even 200 wins is fading out. But I guess CC Sabathia did have over 200 wins, so at least there's that element where he has that sort of longevity, and that might even be the new benchmark. If you have over 200 wins, you might be a Hall of Famer, or 250 or something like that. Although we don't even really recognize wins and losses as a pit from a pitcher anymore. So it'd be really interesting to see what starters going forward, aside from like after like Zach Greinke and Max Scherzer, people like that, who gets in like in the future. And CC Sabathia, to me, he's not Zach Greinke, he's not Max Scherzer. I don't think he's those level of pitchers. So I wasn't expecting him to get in, especially on the first ballot, which traditionally is viewed as a massive honor. Um, I do think the voting has probably changed a little bit. So I don't know if like the first ballot thing is the honor it used to be. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know. I think just getting in at this point is absolutely, you know, the goal. If you get in the Hall of Fame, that's awesome. CC Sabathia, like I said, I never personally pictured him as a Hall of Famer, although I don't always have those sort of opinions on players. I'm never like, oh, he's for sure a Hall of Famer. He's not. He better get in. He's not. I mean, I kind of explained this earlier. So I'm definitely, I was a little surprised, but I did I do enjoy the fact that he got in. I like CC Sabathia, although he was a major figure on the 2008 Brewers team that the Cubs were competing with, that they got at the trade deadline, and I do very, very distinctly remembering that and being very, very. scared that the Brewers were going to win the division. Of course, the Cubs did, but then neither team did anything in the playoffs that year. So I don't know if it really mattered that much on a big picture, but still, I remember that CC Sabathia trade, and then he ultimately goes signs with the Yankees, and then he was there for a long time. I do believe I was at the Yankees Red Sox game, the last series that CC Sabathia played in the majors, and then the Red Sox gave him, I think it was a piece of the scoreboard or something like that, a little like things that they do when players on a farewell tour. That probably should have been my sign that hey, CC Sabathia is going to be a Hall of Famer because those types of players don't get the farewell tour very often, or like non-Hall of Fame types players don't often get those type of farewell, especially Yankees Red Sox. I mean, that's a huge rivalry, and those teams traditionally hate each other. So that should have been my sign that maybe he is closer to the Hall of Fame than I think. But I just personally never. I was surprised that he got in, especially on the first ballot. Now, I guess I'm not surprised he got in eventually, but on the first ballot, I certainly did not see that coming. So that was definitely intriguing, but I don't think CC Bathy is necessarily controversial, his inclusion in the Hall of Fame by any means. I just think it was surprising he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. That was a little out of left field for me, but I'm a little ignorant on those kinds of things anyways. But man, I do remember CC Sabathia, especially his Indians days when he played for Cleveland. Those are the days I remember him the most. And then, like I said, that trade to the Brewers. But that's the other thing too is he played for the Cleveland, which is not the most accessible team for me, especially in the Midwest. Well, you would think the Indians could be a little more accessible to the Midwest, but there's a lot of other teams which there's a lot of blackout rules, especially when you live in Iowa, that make no sense. The Indians actually aren't part of it, so if I had MLB TV, my younger days, I could have watched a pitch more. I never really bought it because I could just watch my team on TV, so there's no really real point in that. So I didn't watch a lot of Cleveland Indians games just because they're American League. They weren't a local team. They played the White Sox a lot, obviously being in the same division, but I didn't watch the White Sox nearly as much as I would watch Cubs games because I'm a Cubs fan and not a White Sox fan. So I guess that makes sense. But so I didn't see CC Sabathia pitch much. That is a very difficult sentence to say. So I got through it. Congratulate me. Put in the comments that you're very, very proud of me for saying CC Sabathia pitch because I did it. But didn't see him pitch much, but he had such a reputation, and he definitely is a presence on the mound. I mean, he's a very large man, very good pitcher. I just, like I said, a little surprised he got in first ballot, but no issue with it whatsoever. I like CC Sabathia. Good baseball player, obviously. The last one, Ichiro Suzuki. But what's funny to me is you never see him called Ichiro Suzuki. And I don't know if that's a Japanese thing or what, because like Hideki Matsui, I don't remember him being called Hideki. I do remember him being called by his last name Matsui, but much in the same way that you hear like any Major League Baseball player called by their last name or any athlete. So I don't think there's anything significant to that. Shohei Ohtani, you do hear Shohei sometimes, but I don't think it's as prevalent as what you heard with Ichiro. So I don't know if like that's just a Japanese thing. I don't know if he just got the Madonna treatment where he was such a massive superstar, he just gets to be called Ichiro. But he was. And even if you look at this card, and I know this camera is awful, so you probably can't read that. I can, barely, and it's backwards from my perspective, I guess. But Ichiro is on this card. But his name is Ichiro Suzuki. And I actually now don't remember if his jersey said Ichiro or Suzuki. I think it said Ichiro. So I am genuinely curious about why his name became so known as just Ichiro or why he's called that way. I don't know if it's like a traditional thing. I don't know if it's he was like I said such a star that it was kind of like the Madonna treatment. He's Ichiro, she's Madonna, that kind of thing. But I always found that interesting that he's Ichiro. I mean, and it's cool. I like it. I like that that's just what he's called. I have no problem with it. Like I said, I'm just kind of curious how that happened. The fact that I don't know might be ignorant on my part. I don't know, but I just the fact that he's just Ichiro, even though his name is Ichiro Suzuki, you just always see that. So that's just an observation there. But I love Ichiro. I think most people do. When he was elected in, saw a lot of positive just comments from everybody. Like everybody loves Ichiro. 3,000 hits. When you combine his Japanese career, he has the most. He passed Pete Rose. You could argue the merits of that. I mean, Japanese baseball probably not on the same level as Major League Baseball, but a lot of players do come from Japan and succeed here in both places. So there might be some we might underrate the Japanese league a bit. To be honest, I haven't watched too much Japanese baseball. I've watched a little bit because when I was in college, I had the university cable channel and we had Japanese channels, or at least Asian channels. And I just say Japanese because we actually would get Japanese baseball feeds on the channel. And so sometimes you get to watch random Japanese baseball game, but it was all in Japanese and the scoreboards and everything were also in Japanese, so I never really knew what they were saying. But I would occasionally put those on in the background, and I'm sure they weren't live because this is always in the middle of the afternoon, and I know the time difference is quite large. But I haven't seen a lot of Japanese baseball in my life. I would like to watch more. I'd like to go visit, and if you people out there would view or subscribe or all that comment, hey, maybe this YouTube channel can take off and I can go see some Japanese baseball. I would even make videos about it. I would talk about it into this weird old webcam with this light on my face about Japanese baseball. If you guys give me the opportunity by viewing and liking and subscribing, that's a thing that could happen. And I would even get a better camera and do better videos. I wouldn't even just talk about it this way. I would actually like do a whole thing. But that's up to you guys. That's up to the viewers in the world if they want to see more of this talking about baseball, because I know you do. But I don't know what that was. I'm sorry about that. But Ichiro, big fan of him. He's funny. He played such a unique style, like the contact hitter thing, the fact that he got a running start when he hit, like when he would swing, his speed, his cannon of an arm. He even had a bit of power. You just never really saw it unleashed as often as it could be. I mean, I'm just looking at the back of his baseball card here. 37 home runs in 4 years. I mean, not crazy, but 1 year with double digits. You can tell the power is there if he wanted it to be, but that just wasn't his style of play. And I like baseball with in any sport really, not just baseball. I like different positions who can do different things. Players who perform different roles on a team just adds a variety and element of fun to the sport that you don't see a lot with the way modern analytics has kind of uniformed everything. Like I think the biggest problem, I know like a lot of people complain about the threes in the NBA. I don't think it's necessarily inherently the threes in the NBA that's causing the problem. It's just that everybody plays so similar, and there's not a lot of variety. You don't have a lot of variety in individual play styles, not even like team strategies, but in individual play styles. It just feels like everything's kind of stagnant there. It's the same thing in like football, even although football is like popular as ever because it's football, and this country loves football. But it just seems like everyone tries to play the same way. Everyone tries to go for it on fourth down all the time. The idea is to pass the ball, though there does seem to be more like an emphasis on running now, which is great to see that that's kind of coming back into the game. But there's still a lot of emphasis on the quarterback and the passing game and things like that. And everybody tries to play a very similar strategy. Although, I don't know. That could probably be debated a little bit. That's not the point of this. This is about baseball Hall of Famers. I'll stop talking about football. But baseball, a lot of it's the same thing. I mean, you got pitchers who throw like starting pitchers who throw 4 or 5 innings of a game, and then you bring in your relievers. All of them throw really hard. All of them just kind of try to throw like they don't not a lot of pitching as much as there's just trying to throw nasty stuff. And while that's fun to watch, I don't have a problem watching a guy throw nasty breaking balls and 110 miles an hour and all this stuff. It's nice to throw it up, throw a curveball, if you will, and watch like a Greg Maddux or a Kyle Hendricks or somebody who doesn't throw as hard but also try to get through a game in a different way. And it's the same with obviously offensively. Like a lot of players nowadays, you try to draw walks, take your pitches, get on base, hit the ball hard, and hit home runs and hit with power. And obviously things like batting average don't matter like they used to. Speed's kind of gotten back into the game with the stolen base rules, which is kind of nice to see that there is a little bit value in that because it looked like stolen bases were never coming back, and that's not true. It has been reinfected into the game. I don't completely love the way it was implemented by changing the rules to kind of make it artificially get a boost, but at the same time, it's something people want to see. You had to find a way to get it back into the game, so I guess that made sense to do. But for the most part, like when I was younger, you had a lineup that very much like every single part in the lineup kind of performed a role. Like you had your leadoff man whose goal was to get on base and steal bags. You had your second hitter who usually was a good bunter who could move the guy up, or he could bunt, he could move the guy up. He usually could hit for contact. He would try to foul off pitches. I remember guys like Placido Polanco or Fernando Vino. Although Vina might have actually hit leadoff, but they were the types of players that I'm thinking of here. They just foul the ball off and they're just annoying contact hitters, and maybe their stats don't actually reflect that. I just remember like that's the type of player they were presented as. They're the type of guy who'll hit the ball the opposite direction so a runner could advance. Like they're that type of hitter who would give themselves up. They're never like an elite hitter, but they perform their role. And then you had your three hitter, who is usually your best hitter. You had your four hitter, who's usually your power hitter, as the cleanup hitter. Your five hitter, six hitter, usually were power guys who weren't really that good at hitting, but they could hit the ball really far if they need be. And then you had your like seven, eight hitters. Seven hitters seems to always be like a guy who was struggling or something, and then eighth hitters was almost always a catcher for some reason, except for in the American League where the catcher usually batted ninth. But in the National League, you always had the catcher hitting eighth, and then you had the pitcher hitting. So there's always like these distinct roles in the lineup, and the offenses may not have been as good as they are today, which like is probably true. I mean, the stats say that hitting for power and hitting the ball hard and walking is the best thing to do as an offense, but it presented a variety that was completely enjoyable to watch. Like there's aesthetics to it that were pleasing. And I'm not saying I don't even hate the game today. I'm not like trying to be like, oh, the game was better 20 years ago and all that stuff, because I don't even completely agree with that. There's just there's just certain things that I kind of miss. And maybe they weren't even things that made the game better. I don't know if a two guy trying to get out on purpose is actually good for the game. I just remember those roles existing, and there's a familiarity to it and an intrigue to it to me. And that's kind of what I'm putting across. But Ichiro was one of those types of players. I mean, he usually hit leadoff, and like I said, he was able to get on base, able to be disruptive, able to hit for average, able to just do all that stuff. And he was fun to watch too because of his talents. Um, but that was just my thought process with him. So love Ichiro, one of my favorite all-time players. Very, very happy he got in. I could gripe over the fact that one person didn't vote for him, so he wasn't the second ever unanimous hitter, but it is what it is. Um, so those are the three guys who got inducted 2 days ago. The other two players, I don't really know as much about. I didn't grow up with them, but these are the guys who vote in the Veterans Committee. Yeah, Dave Parker and Dick Allen. Now, Dave Parker, I knew a lot about because my dad talked about him a lot whenever the Cubs would play the Pirates. He would just mention Dave Parker. Um, he might even call one of the players Dave Parker. I don't remember why that was a thing, but just a little fun thing that he would have done. So I'm very familiar with Dave Parker just because of that. And he was a key player on the Pittsburgh Pirates in their early days. I know he played later on too. I believe he was on the A's when they won the World Series in 1989, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But he had a very good career. And he played in my lifetime, which kind of surprised me when I found that out. I don't think I realized that part of it until I looked him up after he got put in the Hall of Fame. Dick Allen is a player I never actually knew much about at all. I'm not even sure I knew of him until I started recently working on this project where I'm trying to indulge in all kinds of baseball entertainment and that things like that. He came up a lot when I would watch old episodes of This Week in Baseball. And because he came up so much, of course, I looked up his stats. And that's when I started to realize how good Dick Allen was of a player. And I started to get on this guy really should be in the Hall of Fame. And he probably was the biggest, one of the biggest names who should be in the Hall of Fame going back a ways. And I think like it's good that he got put in. I'm happy he got put in. It always sucks when a player like that gets put in after he died. One of my favorite all-time players, Ron Santo, unfortunately experienced the same thing. And I know Phillies fans, they almost had the same reaction of he got in after he died. That's, talking about how frustrating that was. And it is. But honestly, Dick Allen might have been one of the biggest snubs of all time going back to the beginning of baseball. Um, there's other players I can kind of think of, like Bill Dolan from the early 1910s. Um, you could argue for other players too, just who kind of, when I'm going through all this baseball stuff, and you end up finding this player. You're like, okay, I've never heard that name. Let me see how good he was, and then you're like, oh wow, this guy was actually very, very good. I think Dale Allen's one of the people on the top of that list. So it's great to see that he got in. Like I said, very frustrating that it's after they die, so they don't get to really experience that honor. At least Dave Parker gets to do that, despite he's going through illnesses there. But it's great to see that he at least gets to get inducted and experience that aspect of it. So those are the 5 players going into the Hall of Fame. As I said before, I'm not going to exactly say they don't deserve to get in or they do deserve to get in. That's not how I view the Hall of Fame. I do think those kind of debates can kind of get pretty boring. I just more wanted to talk about them and more their impacts on myself as a baseball fan and just really give my thoughts about what I felt when I've either watched them or experienced them more distantly, especially when it comes to Dick Allen and Dave Parker. But it's really cool. It makes you feel really old when guys that you grew up watching are getting inducted in the Hall of Fame. So that part's I'm still trying to adjust to that. In fact, I moved out east in 2017, and now experiencing players who are still playing when I first moved really showing me like wow, my aging is really a thing. So that experience is not as exciting or as fun, but it's really cool to see these players you grew up with, a player that you watched in the minor leagues when you were really young, getting in. So congratulations to those guys. I think it's great that they're going to be remembered forever in the Hall of Fame. I like to see it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, drop a subscribe, all that stuff. You can also give your thoughts on the players, what they meant to you as a baseball fan. You can give your thoughts on if you think they belong in the Hall of Fame or not. Like I said, I don't necessarily enjoy that sort of discussion. That doesn't mean that other people do. And I totally get that, but whatever thoughts you have, leave a comment. That would be great. But other than that, thank you for watching, and you have a great night.